Hello?
Yes, good. So I just need to turn this off.
Should we start?
Sorry, I think we had a problem with this sound, but it should be working now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Hello again.
Mute that.
Okay.
Okay, so just to introduce ourselves, my name's Glyn Hughes. I'm Deputy Director of Assessment at Cambridge Assessment English, where I've worked for the last 16 years. Before that, I was an English language teacher in Ukraine and Hungary, and I was also a CELTA trainer. Since working at Cambridge, I've worked on a range of products, including FIRST, IELTS, BULATs, all manner of things. I have a master's degree in applied linguistics from Aston University, and recently I've been working on a number of technology-related projects.
And I'm Marianne Pickles. I lead the assessment development team at Cambridge Assessment English, and we work on projects to do with innovation and the future of assessment. I've been working at Cambridge Assessment English for the last 5 years. Before that, I was an English language teacher in Spain mostly. I did CELTA and Delta, and I was a speaking examiner, and I have a master's in language testing from Lancaster University. So today we're going to talk to you about the digital future, the impact of technology on learning, teaching, and assessment. So to begin, here is a picture of an impressive building in Cambridge. This is not our office building. We don't work in there. It would be really cool if we did, but we don't. The reason this picture is here is because Cambridge Assessment English is part of the University of Cambridge. We are a non-teaching department, and this is one of the Cambridge colleges. And our mission is to help people learn English and prove their skills to the world. We've been making English language exams since 1913, and today over 5.5 million people take our exams every year. So in today, this picture is our office building, so that's where we really do work in Cambridge. And in today's webinar, we're going to cover the following topics. We'll look at learning and assessment and how we believe they are interconnected. And we're also going to look at how technology can be used for feedback and also for motivation and engagement.
So first, question for you. So we're from an assessment organisation. We both used to be teachers, but we haven't been teachers for a while. So you actually, I think, know a lot more at the moment about what it's like to be in the classroom than we do. So we're hoping to bring some value to you from our assessment background. But first, we want to know what you think. What is the role of assessment in English language learning? What do you think it is? What do you think it should be? While we carry on, just write your ideas in the chat box, and we'll see what you have to say.
Okay.
So we'll just continue while you write, but I'm sure as teachers, you're great at multitasking, so you can do both.
Okay, so in the world of technology, I'm sure you'll agree that it very often feels like things are changing quicker than it's possible to keep up. And there's actually been some papers published about this, and it said that it is the case that things are changing so fast that we just can't adjust to it. And this is quite an interesting phenomenon in relation to English language learning and assessment, because the changes in technology have had a big impact on how we communicate with each other. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the changes to the Common European Framework of Reference in 2017. They introduced some new criteria, some new descriptors. And one of the things that they introduced was the idea of online communication. Now, if you think about when you're using WhatsApp or a similar program and you are using synchronous text to communicate with somebody, you're reading and you're writing, but not in the same way that you would write an email and read an article. So that's actually a new type of language skill that has emerged through changes in technology. Similarly, I think more and more people are finding that they don't need to be able to spell correctly, certainly when they're using technology, because we have spell checkers on our phones and on our computers. But what we do need to do is check back over what we have written to make sure that predictive text hasn't transformed our words into something totally strange and unintended. So there's kind of a proofreading skill there that is different because of the technology now. So these are some of the questions that we face and that in the world of assessment and also as teachers, we all have to try to get to grips with.
Excuse me. And it's not just that. Technology is also changing how people learn and how teaching happens. And it's changing people's expectations of both learning and assessment. Some of the logos and names on there will be very familiar to you. I'm sure you all know Duolingo, and many of you have maybe tried to learn a language using Duolingo. Duolingo has this assumption that you don't necessarily need a teacher. You can do it by yourself. It also has other assumptions about language learning, which we don't necessarily agree with. But it's sometimes a frightening thought that more and more learning is happening without teachers. But even where teachers are involved, the method of it is very different. So VIP Kid there is a Chinese organization where you have one-to-one tuition with a child in China and a teacher in North America. So the models are changing. There's more and more remote learning, more and more adaptive learning. So Newton, for example, they do adaptive learning. They're specialists in adaptive learning, largely for maths and sciences, not so much for language. And education is changing how teachers work. So you're all familiar with Padlet at the top there. You've recently started working with Google, and I know you've got some exciting plans as the Cultura to be working with Google. So there's huge amounts of change, which changes, I think, what we can do, but also what our learners' expectations of us are. So there's a lot to keep up with there as well. So we'll start with a bit of a theoretical framework of how we view the interplay between learning and assessment. And when we talk about this, we talk about learning-oriented assessment. Now, over on the left-hand side of your screen, as you look at it, you see what traditionally we as an organization have done, which is this record of achievement, this certification, this application of external standards to what's going on. You'll see the CEFR there on the left, and there's a record of achievement. And also, there's this idea of a syllabus, a thing that you're aiming for that is set by an external standard. So you've got the Common European Framework, you've got our exam specifications, and then from that you've got activity in the middle, and then you've got the circle on the right, which is learning-oriented assessment activity. And I think the idea of learning-oriented assessment, it's not assessment-oriented learning, because it's not learning that's designed for an assessment, it's learning-oriented assessment. The whole purpose of assessment is to orient itself towards learning and to encourage learning and to measure learning. So then, on the right-hand side, you've got what how the learning happens. You've got at the top, you've got a task that learners carry out, that the teacher gives the learners. That results in language activity that your learners are doing. The teacher observes them carrying out that activity, and they interpret that activity, and they think, okay, what are they struggling with? What are they doing really well? What do I need to do next? How can I help them? And actually, that interpretation is also assessment. So assessment is what you do every day in the classroom in a less formal way, but you are always interpreting. Assessment is just another form of interpretation, a more formal one against standards. Then as a result of that interpretation, you make a record of the activity and a record of what you've done with the class and how they've done. You'll keep the marks, or you'll make some notes about what your learners did. And then you start forming a strategy about, okay, what do I need to do with this information that I have? What do I need to do next? How do I need to tell them about what happens? And as a result of that strategy, you do two things. You give feedback to the learners, and you update your objectives. You think, okay, I thought I'd have to do this, but what do I have to do next? So people talk about technology as creating a possibility for personalized learning, but teachers have been doing personalized learning for years. That's how learning works in the classroom. Then the teacher selects the next task for the learners, for the class, and then it goes around. The idea is in a virtuous circle. And sometimes when the teachers and the schools want some external an external record or an external check, they'll come to people like us. So that's the view we have. So again, a question I have for you to think about is two questions, in fact. How can technology help with that? How can technology help both teachers, exam boards, assessment organizations, and learners? And also, what can teachers do that technology can't do? And if you want to have a think about that, you can discuss. If you're with colleagues, you can talk about it. And if you want to put something in the chat box, that would be great too.
Yeah, we would love to hear what you think about these questions.
Okay, is anybody writing anything? Okay, we're not getting anything here. I think we've just realized that our screen is frozen, so we can't see your comments. So give us a moment. So we'll just let you think about that for a minute, and then we can see what you have to say. Lots of information.
Oh, great.
So what's assessment? A way to diagnose our students. Tech can enhance engagement. We've got a YouTube link. It's reducing workload.
That's interesting. Teachers can be more tactful. So it's not just, no, you did this wrong.
Mm-hmm. And it's that thing about complexity that a teacher brings that technology can't always bring.
Tech can trigger curiosity. That's a very good point.
We'll come back to that later. That's something we definitely have.
Teachers can better assess students' performance as a whole, while technology be seen only from one language.
Develop critical thinking. Is that tech or teachers?
I think they mean teachers.
Yes, probably. Technology can promote peer correction. That's a
very good point as well.
Fostering independence. We'll come back to that later as well. Okay, shall we? So keep writing. It's really interesting to hear what you've got to say. So some nice tech-enabled collaboration going on, which is great.
So it sounds as if, from what you're saying, that the teacher of tomorrow probably doesn't look like this little guy. Although I should say that this is Pepper, and he's actually a teaching assistant, and he's a very nice teaching assistant, but we don't think he's going to replace the teacher anytime soon.
Okay. But I think the role of tech as a teaching assistant is a great metaphor, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll just run through some things that we think teachers can do that tech can't do. And then things that both teachers and tech can do, but in different ways. And then things that teachers can't do, but tech can. And I think it'll be interesting. I think probably a lot of the things we have on these slides are things that you're talking about. So let's just see what we've got here. So first, what can teachers do that tech can't do? So there's this thing about creating a social learning environment. Now, I think somebody even said that technology can help with that because it can facilitate peer-to-peer correction, and you have MOOCs and you have things like that. But the teacher is still fundamental in bringing that together and in sort of curating that environment. The teacher has the expertise that can help and encourage. And the classroom, especially you teaching classrooms, the classroom's a real social learning environment, and the teacher is very much, it's the teacher's role to curate that environment. The teacher, language is a living thing, and we very strongly believe, as you do, that it's a communicative thing. And technology isn't always as good at promoting interaction, discussion, and collaboration. Technology can be used for people to collaborate with each other, but it's harder to collaborate with technology. And so again, it's that teacher's role of encouraging interaction, encouraging discussion and collaboration. Higher order thinking skills. I think somebody said something about that, about language is communicative competence. Language learning requires strategies. Technology can tell you, but teachers can encourage you and tell you to think about and encourage you to reflect on what you've done and have a conversation with you about it and promote those higher order thinking skills in a way that technology can't really do. Again, focusing on the skills and the application of knowledge. Because language is about meaning and about being able to use language in, you learn the words, you have the knowledge, and it's about applying your skills and your knowledge in very specific contexts and using judgment to know when to do that. And the teachers, with the experience they have, with all the learners that they've taught, bring a lot of knowledge to that and a lot of skill to that technology can't really replace. And that interpersonal positive learning climate. That's one of the core things of the teacher's job. Is encouragement, being a positive attitude towards learning, because as we know, a lot of people find learning a language a very hard thing to do, and so it's persisting and perseverance. Technology can do some of those things, as we'll find later, but the teacher really helps.
And some people have mentioned the emotional side of what a teacher can do, and I think that feeds into that point as well.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, the teacher knows when somebody's down and doesn't want to carry on. So teaching is not just gathering data. It's about creating high quality learning environments, and they're deeply relational, humanistic, creative, socially constructed. So they're about people, and they're active and inquiry oriented. So it's about pushing people in, or sort of pointing people in the right direction and helping them. So what can teachers and tech both do? They both focus on knowledge really well. Teachers do input, teachers correct, teachers can do a lot. Technology is really good at that as well. I'm really good at providing practice for things like that. Adaptive and personalized learning. Technology does it in different ways, but as we said, teachers have been doing that for years. It's core to teachers. What technology brings is the ability to do it with data and at an individual level. With teachers, with 20 or 30 people, or even 10 or 12 people in a class, it can be difficult to adapt and personalize for every single learner. What you tend to do is do it for the class. Mark student work. Teachers and tech can both do it. I'm sure you love it. It's one of your favorite parts of your job, marking students' work. They do it in different ways, and we'll come back to that later. Record keeping. Teachers keep records. Tech can keep records in different ways, and also tech can really help teachers keep records and centralize it in one place. And I know because you're starting to work with Google, that's probably something that will really help. And then teachers and tech both give feedback, and we'll come back to that in more detail later, because there's some really interesting things about how teachers and tech work differently with feedback. That'll be a theme for us. And motivation. And again, we'll come back to that. Teachers and tech motivate students in very different ways. What can tech do that teachers can't? Handle vast amounts of data. It can crunch numbers, make correlations outside just one classroom, students all over the world see what's working. So it brings a sense of possibility that we haven't had before. It can do ongoing assessment. Teachers do it in one way, but tech can do it with numbers and data and provide feedback all the time. Marianne, do you want to say something? No. Okay. Instant feedback. So you put something in, the computer does it, and it gives it back to you. We'll look at that later again in more detail. 24/7 global access. I'm sure you would love to provide 24/7 global access to your learners, but tech does it really well.
And tech doesn't need to sleep or eat.
No, or yeah. And it doesn't get tired. It doesn't get annoyed. It doesn't hold grudges or get annoyed about handwriting or think, why can't this person get it right, or make assumptions. So it doesn't have all those very human biases. Sometimes that knowledge that you have is good, all of that complexity around a learner. But actually, sometimes it's good to have a tool that doesn't have any of those, so they can really complement each other. So we'll pick up on some of those themes particularly around feedback and motivation and that ongoing assessment thing, and look at a writing auto marker that we can use called Write and Improve. Now, Write and Improve is powered by artificial intelligence. It was originally built up from 30 million words of error-tagged learner data, so from the Cambridge Learner Corpus. And we're going to look at how it can help teachers and learners. And we're going to ask the question, also, can it do everything a teacher does? So first, have a look at this. This is a story called A Lucky Escape. A teacher set this task to their class, and one learner wrote this in response. So a story called A Lucky Escape. Can you have a think and let us know? 2 questions. How would you mark this up? How would you correct this? And what feedback would you give to a learner about this? So have a chat if you're in a room together, and then write some things down. We're just going to give you a minute or 2 to do that, and then we'll move on.
And also just to say that this was for a B1 level student. So maybe they were preparing for B1 preliminary, for example.
I like that. Technology can never be truly creative and sympathetic.
Mm. Where is that?
That's
Oh,
Ian.
yes, I see. Sorry.
Oh, it's starting to rain heavily again. Okay, we're going to move on and show you. This is 2 teachers have marked this student's work. Have a look at the 2 bits of feedback, and your questions now are, what do you think? Which is more like what you would have done, and which do you prefer and why? So have a look at it. There's quite a lot of information there. Have a look and see what you think.
Maybe somebody prefers the second one.
I wonder why.
Oh, maybe they can tell us why. Responding on content is really important.
Yes. Thank you, Alexandre. Yes, it's clearer. It's a really good point about the content. Does anybody like the first one more? Or are there things about the first one that are better, even if you don't like it more? It's not a trick question.
First one's confusing, it won't help the students. That's a good point. Why is it confusing? That's an interesting point about the codes. Yes, you could mark it up with codes. Of course, then you have to teach the learners what the codes are, which is another thing for them to learn. Oh, this first one, the teacher is a bit rude. That's a very good point.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is how do you feel about this as a learner when you get this back from your teacher?
Yes, it's a lot of information at once. That's an excellent point. So in the first example, the teacher has corrected and pointed out every single issue with that text. I wouldn't know what to read first. The first one would be overwhelming, yeah. And discouraging, yes.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that.
Now this is very interesting. So Mariana says the second one focuses on one grammar point. Do we think that's good or bad?
Yeah, not good, and that's already what Anna's just said about not feeling not good enough because of the amount of mistakes is really interesting about the role that mistakes play and the attitude we have towards mistakes. So that first one has treated mistakes as a problem, and it's really important that learners we think it's really important that learners don't view mistakes as a problem but as an opportunity to learn. So actually saying, why have you made so many mistakes is not helpful.
Yeah, and some people are saying, you know, it's a good thing that it's only picked out some of the errors. Sometimes it's useful to focus only on some points.
Yeah. And what's interesting, what you don't know and what the teacher knows is actually the broader context. Somebody mentioned that earlier about teachers know the broader context. And so maybe this teacher knows that, okay, this is an issue for this learner. So let's focus on this or this is what we're doing in class at the moment, or this is, you know, there are reasons for focusing on it. Okay, should we move on to the next bit? There's lots of time is against us a little bit, so we will keep moving on. This is where it begins to get quite complicated. We're going to see how a machine does it, and we're going to ask you to do that. So we're going to look at Write and Improve. So you have a QR code there, or just Google Write and Improve. And when you get to the landing page, let me know. Let us know.
Oh, good. You've got the link there in the chat also. Thank you. Excellent.
Isn't technology great? Let's just move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you're in, can you go through these steps? And I should say this isn't what you would do with your learners. What we're doing is we're cheating a little bit because we want to show you the feedback. Can you put the text into the chat box for us? So from two slides, not that text. So this text.
Do you want me to type it?
Can you copy it?
Can you copy and paste it into the chat box? Oh, but we need them to.
No, we need them to be
the
able to
actual
copy
text.
it.
No. But so that you can move on.
Oh no, but
While I type.
But we don't want you to type it.
no, we don't need because it needs to be every
errors.
mistake. Okay, well, let's give us a moment. We can probably do something with this, can't we?
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
So we need to come out.
Yeah, we're going to come out of the presentation for a moment.
Copy and paste.
Oh, that's easier.
We don't have access to that.
And then go back.
I'll type it.
No, no, it won't work if you type it.
But we need every single error.
I'll do my best.
Where are we? Where is the thing? Yes.
Sorry, we're just having some technical difficulties in our technology-themed presentation.
And we can't put it in there.
Paste it in the chat box.
Can we get to the chat box from?
So I now have it on this computer. I've copied it on this computer.
Okay.
And we want to put it into the chat box.
So is that available to everybody?
No, just a second. That's stage one.
Stage one. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we're trying to send you the text via the chat, but we have three different devices set up. So
one of the things I'm sure you know about using technology is you learn a lot the first time you try and do it.
Oh, I can't copy from here. I'm gonna type it. Yeah, I think it's just easier.
Which level? You should choose beginner level.
Can you go back to the presentation?
Have we got a slide with the output? Because if it's not going to work, we can just show them and they can do it later.
Sure do. I did think about that, but I thought, yeah.
Or can we show them in Write and Improve on a screen and present that?
Can we present a different thing to them?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do it differently.
So yes, we wanted you to copy and paste this text into Write and Improve, but we're having some difficulties getting it into the chat box. So
which computer is doing the presenting? This one. Okay.
Yes, Renato.
What's that?
He's not the only one with tech problems.
Okay, how do I share this?
Oh, it's. Oh no, it's not.
Stop sharing from there.
Sorry? So I want to share this rather than that.
Oh, you have to escape from the...
I have to escape from the... I have. Oh, from...
Somebody's saying we have it now.
Projected.
Oh, you have the text. So have you typed in the text?
Not fully. 50%. So go to the page where you want to be, then you want to share, and just send it here. Okay?
How?
Oh, why is it not working? Let's try again.
Ah, so they can't see anything at them. So that froze again. So let's send it. How do I send it? What do I do to present this?
Should be doing this automatically. Where is the?
They have 4 sentences. You can paste it into any task. Oh, Andre says, can you show the text once again? I think I may have a solution. Nope.
That's okay, that's okay. So, yes, people are seeing what you're seeing in this computer.
Okay, all right, okay. Do you want to see do you have a solution?
Ah, okay.
They're seeing it.
Yeah, but now they can see write and improve.
Yeah, they can see whatever you can see in this computer.
Okay, what we will do.
Just ignore the screen. Yeah, good.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do it slightly differently. So this is what happens. So the text, as you can see, is in here, as the student would have entered it. And now what Write and Improve has done is you click on check and it's marked it up. Here it is. And if you look at the top, it's given them a level. Have a look at this screen and have the questions I'd like you to answer is, what do you think of this? How do you think it's similar to what the teachers did? How do you think it's different? And what do you think the learner does next? How do you think this helps the learner, thinking about all the things we did before?
Zoom in, please, somebody says.
Okay. Just go like that. Yes. Ah. Oh, that's.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Is that better?
Guide students into a more organized way to improve their skills, making them more aware of their own development.
I'll show you some of the things it does.
But it did not give any feedback on content, given that the task is different from what was written. Yes, that's true.
That's true. So the task is different from what was written because we're sort of just doing this as an example, but that's true. It doesn't give any feedback on content. And we talked about the fact that the teacher did, and that was important. So you'll see you'll see it's asking questions. So it's not saying you got this wrong, partly because it has a teacher's voice, and partly because it's AI, so it's not 100% sure. I'll show you something else that it does. You click on help up here. It gives a word level feedback, sentence level feedback, and score feedback.
But something else to point out is that, this is really useful, but it doesn't comment on discourse at a discourse level. So in terms of the text organization, that's something that you would need your teacher's help with.
So what happens next was the other question. What do you think happens next?
Yes, if you are the learner and you have typed this task in and received your feedback, what do you do after that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Does it assess when? No, it doesn't assess when a learner needs to improve cohesion. So those discourse features, it doesn't do. So, shall we?
Yeah, nobody has written an answer, but do you want to
Okay, so we'll go back to the presentation. Have a play with Write and Improve afterwards. It's free. You may need to sign in, but it's still free. After you've done a couple of things, you need to sign in. But
no, but they can see presenter mode because they can see everything.
Oh no, which one? Okay. It's exactly what we're seeing. There we go. Let's hide that, shall we?
Just a second.
Oh, we were good. I think
No,
we were good. We were fine. No, we're good. We're
Okay,
good. We're
okay,
good.
I'm sorry.
I swapped it so that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good. Okay. So as we said, it gives word and sentence level feedback. It doesn't correct everything, and as somebody said, it doesn't give any feedback on the meaning. So it doesn't help learners with that. As somebody said something there.
Yeah, somebody has said the learner will be able to rewrite it using the feedback.
Yes. So then that's exactly it. So one of the things it says is, this is a good start. Now improve your writing. Read the feedback, make changes, and click check again. And so what students can do is they can self-correct and resubmit. And what's interesting is they can do that again and again and again, and they can do it immediately. So it has this iterative thing, and it's instantaneously. Can you imagine as a teacher, you mark something, and the student goes away and sits down and changes it. And says, now can you have another look? Now can you have another look? Now can you have another look? You can't do that. So what this does, and it really, really encourages that independence, and it gives the students a problem to solve, which is really interesting and really great. Go on, was there a comment?
Yeah, so Anne has said maybe we could put together this tool that provides feedback on language mistakes and our own feedback on content and other things.
Yes,
that's exactly what we think.
Yes, so one of the great things about this is a learner can do it, and they can self-correct, and at the end of a few attempts, then you give it to the teacher, and the teacher gives you the other feedback. And what they've found is that it really does improve performance, and there's data from Write and Improve as the more people draft, the better it gets, and it really teaches this skill of drafting and editing, which is that really important writing skill that as teachers you try and focus people on, to look at and to think about what's wrong with what they can improve about their work. And I think they love it as well, because it's we'll come back to gamification later, but it's a little puzzle for people to solve. And because it's a machine, it's not personal, it's not a judgment from a person, it's very private, and then they have a little puzzle to solve and they try and solve it, and it can be really encouraging.
And it means the quality of the draft that goes to the teacher is higher than would otherwise be the case.
Yes, and it saves workload for you as well, which you talked about at the beginning, because it means you don't have to focus as much on all of the small mistakes. Now you can, if you want, there's paid for versions of Write and Improve where you can see the drafts that the learners have made, and you can see the mistakes that they've corrected, and that's interesting because then you can have conversations with them. Even without that, you can ask them, okay, what mistakes did you correct to begin with? And so the teacher then can bring in those higher order thinking skills that we talked about, and encourage strategies and encourage learners to share strategies.
Yes, that's and somebody here, Bernardo, has said we could give students the opportunity to talk to each other and ask those questions to each other.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's a peer work, peer feedback aspect to that as well.
Yes. So it's a great example of tech and teachers working together.
That's right.
So final quote from this bit: will data replace teachers? No, it won't. Only bad teachers. Because teachers and data do totally different things. Data adds information, like x-rays in hospitals. It adds concrete information to teachers' observation and intuition, but it will never replace experience, personal relationships, and cultural understanding.
Okay, so that was an example of how technology can be used for feedback. And I know this slide isn't an example of a technology, but once I saw it, I had to use it. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. So we're going to move on now and talk about technology for motivation and engagement. Now, on this slide, there are lots of stars, and stars are often used by teachers as a form of extrinsic motivation for students. So it's as a reward. You know, you've done this task well, here's a star. And for the last couple of years at Cambridge, I've been working on projects to do with gaming and gamification. And many of there are many benefits to using games and gamification. But the notion of rewards and motivation and engagement are kind of central to that area. So, but before we continue any further, I want to find out if you know the difference between games and gamification, because these are two terms that we'll be using for the rest of the session, and they do mean different things. Okay, so what's the difference between a game and gamification? Well, I should say that I play games in my free time. I'm a PlayStation 4 gamer. I don't know if any of you are gamers, but if you are, please do announce your presence. And if you're not, that's fine too. You've got plenty of time to play games after this session, which I recommend.
I'm not a gamer, but I do play some games on my phone, and I think games are a great thing to use with learners.
So on this slide, we have 4 pictures. 4 of the pictures come from video games, and 4 of the pictures come from gamified products. So what I would like you to do first is work out which of the 4 pictures come from games and which of the 4 pictures come from gamification.
We're sat next to a Mario Kart player.
Oh, fantastic.
Then we have Fortnite.
Yay! PS4 gamer. If you were here, Gabriella, I would give you a high five. Excellent. Ooh, that's not what I expected to happen. Sorry, I just gave the answers away. Okay, so let's look at an example together. If you know where any of the pictures come from, please write in the chat box if you recognize any of them.
We have a Zelda gamer. I love watching my children play Zelda, but I don't have the thumbs to do it myself.
Diablo, yes, very good. The one in the corner that says level 9 is an example from Diablo 3. The girl shooting the zombies is Fortnite, that's right. Yes, very good. Assassin's Creed Origins skill tree. Lol, indeed. So that's 3 of the ones from games. And the last one from a game is the trophy earned valedictorian in the top corner. That's from a game called Bully. So let's have a look, because there are some pairs here. So the first one, the Assassin's Creed skill tree here is the example from a game. And then the green skill tree, that comes from an app called Musician, which is designed to help people learn music. So the difference here is that the skill tree from Assassin's Creed shows the skills of your character within the game, whereas the skill tree from Musician shows your skill progression in real life in an activity that is not a game itself. So for example, playing a guitar it's fun, but it's not a game, whereas Assassin's Creed is a game. So the green one is gamification, the Assassin's Creed one is a game. With the one underneath, level 9 in Diablo, your character has gained enough experience to improve a level, whereas the one next to that with the egg, that's from Duolingo, and here you've gained a level because of your language practice that you've completed. So this is another example of where a feature leveling from games has been put into a context which is not a game, and that's Duolingo, that's the gamification.
Shout out to Bruno, who did get bully.
Oh, well done, Bruno. Okay, so with the trophies, I am addicted to trophies. I'm a big fan, and this one is an example of a platinum trophy. So if you complete everything in a game, that's what you earn. Next to that, there's a trophy from a fitness app. So if you walk a certain distance, it will give you this reward. So again, in the first example, you are rewarded for playing the game. In the second example, you're rewarded for walking, which is not a game. and is not, not fun as far as I'm concerned. And then the last one, this is where the difference, I think, becomes really clear, because you can see that in the first picture, that's a screenshot from the gameplay of Fortnite. So the core activity is gameplay. But on the other side, this is from Hello English, which is a gamified English learning app for people in India. You can see that these are multiple choice English questions like you might find in a course book. They aren't intrinsically fun, they aren't a game, but they've had the whole system has had game-like elements put around it. So this is what we mean by the difference between games and gamification. So this picture shows a project that we've been working on at Cambridge Assessment English. We wanted to experiment with games, video games, and find out, is it possible to design a game which helps people to learn English, or could even assess people's level of English? So we made a very short demo of this game called The Lighthouse. It's about a girl called Cora who goes to visit her grandmother at the lighthouse and discovers that she's missing. And Cora has to solve the mystery of what happened to her gran. Don't worry, her gran is completely fine. So there's no danger involved. And I'd just like to show you a short video. Okay, can you do it for me?
Do we click on the link, or do we go somewhere else?
You can click on the link, I think. Assuming the technology is in our favor.
Hang on, let's try and open it in Chrome. Stop.
Let's see if it's opened, because last time it said that it hadn't and it had.
No, but it tried to open it in Edge.
Right.
Hang on. I want this to see if I can copy link. Oh, we've gone incognito.
Oh.
Here we go.
I think it's working.
Can you hear sound? Doesn't matter.
There's some nice music that goes along with it. Like could sing the music.
Yeah, we don't need to hear it because that won't help them. So they, does that mean they can hear it? Okay. Then they'll turn it right off.
Just mute it. Oh, and this is the best bit coming up. This is my favorite part. It's the shark marine.
Every time.
It's okay. We're all friends here.
Oops, sorry.
No, that's okay. So that was just an example of something that we created as part of a research project to investigate some questions about video games for learning. But my question now for you, and you can write in the chat, is would you use video games with your learners? And indeed, do any of you use them already? But if you don't use them currently, would you use them? Why and why not? Because there are some potentially attractive benefits, which we'll talk about regarding the use of video games, but there are also some potential problems. So let us know what you think in the chat box.
Okay, some people that like point and click games.
Oh, good, yes. It is a point-and-click adventure. It was loosely inspired by Monkey Island, because who doesn't love Monkey Island? Oh, now that's very interesting. The lighthouse looks a lot like games we have on Cultura Inglesa's virtual environment called eCampus.
Now, there's an interesting one. Somebody
that.
says, I'm not a gamer and I wouldn't know how to, however, I'm willing to learn. So that's really interesting, because it is sometimes people think, well, I'm not a gamer, though, so what can I do? And I don't think you have to be a gamer. I think you can use these games.
And I mean, I think if you're willing to learn, then that's a great first step, because you can have a go yourself. I think really you have to be willing to play it yourself, because otherwise you don't understand the emotional process that you go through when you play. Okay, this is really interesting. Lots of people are saying that they would use it. They might use it in pairs. So do you think that you would use it in the classroom, or would you use it for homework? With adults as well, yes, very good point. Did you know, fun fact, that the average age of gamers is 37? So a lot of people think that video games are something for children, but in fact, they've become very mainstream, and it's very normal for people of all ages to play.
That's interesting. Celia says perhaps outside the classroom, so since it may not be communicative.
No, yes, I think that's a very good point. So perhaps it depends on the game, because with something like the Lighthouse, if it's a very individual experience and it's focusing on comprehension, perhaps it's better for them to experience that alone. But then perhaps there are other games that involve collaboration.
Yeah.
I've recommended multiple choice games for my students before. Andre, can you think of any examples? I do remember Grim Fandango, and I played it not that long ago.
Yeah, it's interesting about the games as well, because if you have choices to make, even though they're your choices, if you're doing it in class, I guess there's communication around the game sometimes, isn't there?
Yes, that's true. And in fact, there's some research that suggests that students who are observing other people playing an education game learn as much, if not more than, the person who's actually playing. So this is interesting because you could actually have one student controlling the game and to cast what they're doing onto a screen in the classroom, and you could make a communicative activity around that and have people advising them, instructing them, and you can have them take turns playing it. Okay, so some of you have started to answer my next question for you already, so let's move on. Oh, but first, I just wanted to say a little bit about the theory behind games for education. Oh, Mass Effect, that's my favorite. And why Cambridge Assessment English is so interested in this area. So one of the things about playing games is that, so there are four main benefits. There's a cognitive side to what you're doing. There's an emotional side to what you're doing. There's the motivation, and then there's a socio-cultural aspect. In terms of the emotion, there's research to suggest that experiences which resonate with people's emotions also help with cognition and memory, because it makes the experience more memorable if you felt something about it. So the idea that you identify with the character that you're playing, while you're playing, you embody that person, that's very powerful. Additionally, during our research, we discovered that students experienced lower anxiety in relation to playing the game than they did to the paper-based test. So perhaps the game's context has a lot of power for helping people who are less confident. Obviously, as we've already said, it's engaging, it's an interesting format, and it's something that taps into a lot of people's daily authentic experience, because so many people play games. And on the topic of authenticity, something that games do really well is they provide a context. They provide a genuine purpose and reason for carrying out the different activities within the game. So it's not just, oh, hey, go and do an activity about modal verbs. It's all integrated. You want to go over into the corner and find out what's inside the box and read the book.
Okay. My fault.
Sorry. That kind of thing. And then additionally, there's the issue of 21st century skills. Now, whether or not you like the term 21st century skills, there are certain skills beyond the language side which games help to foster. So for instance, we discovered during our research that the game produced statistically significantly more curiosity in the students than the paper-based version. Now, curiosity is very important when it comes to learning, because if you're curious, you're more likely to go off on your own and find things out. Additionally, games are fantastic for encouraging perseverance, because in a game, you try to do something, and usually the first few times you fail, and you try again and you fail, but you practice and you get better. And you do it again and again and again, and you learn to try, and you learn not to be afraid of failing, because failing is a learning opportunity. And this is a very valuable lesson in the context of learning anything, but also learning languages. And lastly, games often involve some element of problem solving. So they lend themselves to things like task-based learning. And this is also a very useful skill in the modern world. I've put a link at the bottom here to a YouTube video which speaks more about some of the theory that is commonly discussed. This is James Paul G. He is a linguist who became interested in games-based learning. And it's a 23-minute video. It's very engaging, and it gives you a nice overview of the main points.
There's just picking up on some of the things people have been saying. And also, one of the things that was interesting to me, a lot of the things that Marianne said about games, and particularly those 21st century skills, and is Write and Improve, which is not a game at all. But it taps into some of those same things, that problem solving and perseverance, and actually removing that fear of failure.
Yes, that's true.
So it's fascinating because it wasn't designed as a game and isn't even particularly gamified, but it still somehow manages to tap into those things.
Yes, because it's quite visual, the feedback that you get. And if it were me, I would want to put my text in, get the feedback, and then try to fix it, get more feedback, and try to get it as good as I possibly could. There's something about that iterative. Yeah,
and it becomes a positive thing rather than a...
Absolutely.
There's a question here about, or a comment about people spending a lot of time isolated in their bedrooms playing games and not encouraging interaction.
I think that's an old-fashioned view, isn't it?
But it's that, so it's encouraging interaction and talking about games and things, and there's some suggestions here about cooperative games as well, which is a great thing.
And something just to mention on that topic of isolation, I think that's a bit of a stereotype from when games first began. Now, I mean, there are loads of communities of interest around games, and whether the game itself is multiplayer or single player, there are communities that grow up around them. So there are forums online where people discuss. There are YouTube streamers where people share their experience of playing. So I think you would be surprised about the amount, the way in which the gaming community is actually a social community. Okay, so some of you have been doing this already, but I wanted to ask, what are some video games that you could use with your learners? So I don't know if any of
Lots of suggestions on here already. Snipper clips and Overcooked. Would be great. I guess you can look at all these later.
Yeah.
Cool.
Here, I don't know if any of you have come across Ruby Ray, but if any of you have sort of Flyers level, A2 level students, this could be something you might want to look at. It was developed by a London-based game developer, and it's an adventure game. It's mostly around, it's been designed around engagement and exposure to the language. It does have a translation feature, which you may decide that you don't want to use. Or you can ask them to sign up for a language that they don't speak, and then they won't use it, for example. But this is an example of a game that you could very well try out with your students. So are there some other video games that you can think of that you haven't mentioned already that might be appropriate for using with your learners? Yeah. Oxenfree. Okay, maybe you can say a little bit about why that would be useful.
And Overcooked as well.
I have another one I can. Oh, Life is Strange. Yes, those story-based the story-based ones where you have to choose between what decisions you make can be really excellent for B2 and above.
It's all right, Mariana, that's fine, because we're all here to learn about stuff, and so hopefully you'll try out some of these games and have a look and have a think about what you could do with them, or just see if they're fun for you.
So there's a game, for example, called Lifeline, which you can find on your mobile phone, either on Android or iOS. And it's about, it's text-based, and you get messages from somebody who is stranded on an alien planet, and you have to choose between two options to tell them what to do at various points. And it's quite engaging. It also encourages you to go away and find out information outside of the game. So for example, there's one point where you have to find out whether a particular level of radiation is safe. And it's it's surprisingly emotionally powerful as a game, because you feel responsible for the life of this guy. And it's in real time as well. So when he goes to sleep, you don't hear from him for hours. And then you look at your phone and you say, oh, look, Taylor's got in touch. Okay. So this is another activity that we don't have time to do with you in the webinar, but we'd like to set you some homework. Of course, we have no way of checking whether you do the homework, so it's completely up to you. But here's something that you could do with your colleagues to come up with some lesson plans for how you could use games. So, oh, I've never heard of any of these games. Well, that's fine. We've told you something new.
Yeah, I'd never heard of Lifeline till Sunday, and now I'm playing it. It's great.
So how could you use games-based learning with your students in your context? And some things you might want to consider are behavior and classroom management, the use of class time, gameplay and learner pace. You know, is it a game where all of the students really need to proceed at their own pace, or is it something that can be done all together? And are there spin-off activities and opportunities for flipped classrooms? So perhaps you would set the game as homework, say go away and play up to this point, and then in class you can have activities coming off from what they did at home. Okay, so back over to Glyn.
Okay, so we're just going to finish with a very quick reminder of kind of what we're all about, both you and us, and about when we're thinking about technology, when we're thinking about using games in the classroom, remembering sort of what it's about and the key principles of communicative language learning. So just to remember, it's about using the language rather than knowing about the language. Knowing the language is important, but it's about turning that into procedural knowledge and communicative competence. And we've seen some great examples of how technology can help working with the teacher to do those things. Am I doing all of this?
Why don't you?
Okay, and it's about creating authentic learning experiences. And as we've talked about, authenticity can mean different things, and it's that authenticity of learning and that interactional authenticity that you get with the artificial environments that games create, or the idea of communicating and getting feedback from an AI. You're still creating authentic learning experiences. A thread throughout this whole thing has been about treating errors as a natural part of learning, and learning to treat errors as your friend and a learning opportunity. And games can help with that, and we saw how Write and Improve can help with that. Using language appropriately is really important. Now that's interesting, because that's a thing that when we looked at Write and Improve, the technology doesn't help with quite so much. So that's a really important place where the teacher still adds value and can still really help. And practicing grammar and vocabulary within a context. The gaming stuff is really interesting from that point of view, because it talking about that meaningful context and creating that meaningful context. And the thing to remember when using other technology, because the things like Quizlet and Kahoot and the more sort of gamified things is it's fine if the practice isn't always contextualized, but if the learning is in that broader context, then it makes it meaningful.
And we think it's important just to underline these key principles, because when we're looking at different technologies and how they could be relevant for assessment, and we think about how they fit in with these things. So when you're evaluating materials to use with your students, it's useful to think about these as well. Just to leave you with some resources, if you're interested in learning more about the communicative approach, there's a webinar starring me at the following link. There's also, we have a free online course about it's an introduction to using games in the classroom. So particularly for some of the people who said that you have never played games before, this could be a really good resource for you to use.
And then there's the Cambridge Beta website, which is one of our websites where we share things about some of the more innovative and some of the newer, some of the more experimental things that we're trying. And it's got some stuff about the lighthouse, an article written by Marianne, and even a video.
There is another video on there, yes.
She gets about. And there's blogs about technology in language learning and assessment. And finally, there's the Digital Teacher, which is a website where we have reviews of technology and how you can use technology in the classroom. And there's also some lesson plans around using technology. It's just another place where you can look for ideas.
And then, of course, there's always the cambridgeenglish.org main website, which has lots of free online resources for students of different levels. So just to say thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about these things. You've been a fantastic audience.
Yep, I'm looking forward to reading all the comments later as well.
Yes.
It's been great to have you interacting with us so much.
Yes, thank you. And if any of you are going to IATEFL, then I will see you there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.